You want the truth? It doesn't arrive as a thunderclap. It's quieter than that. It's the click of a door you thought was locked but never checked. It's the way rain slides down a window, and you suddenly realize you've been counting the drops for years, as if that were a life. Seattle does that to a mandrizzle, turning time into a spool, winding, until something inside you snaps without the decency of a sound. I was at my desk. The invoices were lined like obedient soldiers. Neat, numbered, necessary. Grease under my nails from Mrs. Chun's transmission, delicate work, faithful work. My shops are precise machines. Torque in, torque out, promise in, promise out. That's how I learned to live after Sarah died. Tighten the bolts. Pay the bills. Pretend the engine of a heart keeps purring if you change the oil often enough. You know how guilt works? It has good posture. It sits straight back in the room and says, "We're fine." It shakes hands with your reflection and holds eye contact for 10 seconds too long. It doesn't rant. It doesn't wail. It balances the ledger. It keeps receipts. I kept receipts. Every check, every gift, every rescue operation disguised as fatherly love. I had a system. Men like me worship systems when we don't trust ourselves. The door opened and Mason walked in, like he'd paid for the floor, hoodie damp with the city's breath, shoes squeaking on my hardwood like tiny, stubborn mice. He didn't say hello, because hello is for people who visit. He said my name like an invoice number. "Dad, I need 5,000. Now, 5,000 what? 5,000 apologies I never demanded when I should have. 5,000 minutes of parenting I subcontracted to money? Don't worry, I didn't say any of that. I nodded the way responsible men nod when they're determining load capacity. I asked what for. He didn't answer the question. He answered a different life. He paced, palms clenched, jaw set to some invisible metronome only fear and entitlement can hear. "I already burned last week's transfer," he said. $3,000 is nothing. Rent eats it. Rent. Hunger is the oldest prayer. Entitlement is its parody. I told him we'd talked about work. He laughed. Not with humor, with friction. Work? Why should I work when you sit on all that money? When you control everything like a dictator? Dictator. Look at that promotion. I was a sergeant once. The kind who irons hope into fabric just by standing up straight. After Sarah, I ironed alone. If grief has a uniform, it's a flannel shirt that never takes the day off. I could have told him power isn't control. It's responsibility with a limp. I could have told him I never sat on money. I buried it under his feet so the ground wouldn't crack again. But when someone storms your home with a word like dictator, there's no room for metaphors. There's only the inventory of what you've already lost. He kept speaking, and the room chilled by degrees. "After you die," he said, casual, like weather, "I'll run the shops better than you ever did. After you die." There are sentences that open a window. Then there are sentences that don't bother with windows. They take a sledgehammer to the wall and call it ventilation. If you feel like this story might reach you somehow, follow the channel. That way, you help me bring more stories like this, and we grow with every life we learn from. That one didn't open anything. It removed the room. I didn't yell, "You want the truth?" I didn't feel the anger at first. I felt the bookkeeping entries racing backward, years unspooling. The 3-year-old with banana on his face. The 8-year-old with untied cleats. The 16-year-old who wanted a car that didn't smell like past lives. The 20-year-old who found the refund button on reality. I saw all the times I wrote checks, instead of teaching him to hold a wrench without bleeding. Do you know that silence that sits after a gunshot? No, not the loud part, the after. The moment when sound itself seems embarrassed to continue. That's what the slam of the door left behind when he left. Sarah's photo rattled on the mantel, then steadied, then trembled again, as if the memory itself had caught a chill it couldn't shake. A smile in that picture is indecently bright. Funerals don't let you keep color. Photographs do. She's in sunlight with our boy at 8, his glove swallowing his small hand. She's forever turning toward him. I am forever turning toward the empty place where she would have been. Let me ask you something. Since we're already naked, have you ever mistaken giving for loving? Have you ever replaced presents with purchase and called it parenting because the receipt had your name on it? Have you ever convinced yourself that if you give enough, they'll never feel the absence you're too scared to measure? If you have, I know you. I know the arithmetic you practice at midnight. You don't count money. You count excuses and call them months. I took out the albums like a penance. Not because I enjoy ritual humiliation, but because discipline is how I learned to breathe. Turn the page. Look the facts in the face. Don't flinch. Page 1. His first school uniform. Buttons misaligned, grin misfiring. Let him tie them himself, Sarah said. He'll learn. I watched him fight the little plastic mouths, and I wanted to help. She put a hand on my wrist. Not yet. Later, I taught him to read tracks in the dirt, to light wet wood with patience and a knife. He learned fast. Children do when you believe they can. After the hospital took her light and left me the bill, I changed the curriculum. I taught him to skip steps, not on purpose, not with malice. With love, which sometimes walks backwards and calls it forward. Because it can't bear the sound of a door closing behind it. Private school, because public didn't sound like protection. University, because it sounded like inheritance you earn while someone else pays. The car, because used, tasted like failure in my mouth, and I wanted victory in his. Tell the truth, don't you dare stop now. Each gift was a white flag with a ribbon. I surrendered 1,000 inches. He learned to take a mile with a smile. That's the secret about spoiling both parties' rot. And only one of them realizes it too late. There's a word I keep circling and not saying, like a dog sniffing at a door it already scratched. Weakness. My weakness is tidy. It's psychological. Yes, guilt pressed flat like a pressed uniform, but it's also moral. I fed a boy sweetness when he needed salt. I shielded him from weather until he forgot the sky has moods. I taught him warmth without weight. I told myself I was protecting him. Translation. I was protecting myself from his unhappiness, from the sharpness of no, from the mirror of his disappointment. I was the adult who stared down engines and storms and funerals. But the word no to my son, that was the avalanche. So I handed him ropes made of velvet and acted surprised when he never learned to climb. After you die, try that sentence on your tongue. It will blister. The blister will burst. Then you'll taste salt and metal and the old coin of revenge. You will imagine 1,000 replies and say none of them, because somewhere under the insult is a diagnosis. If he can say that, then I have failed him on a scale. I never graphed. You think this is where I rage. I don't. Rage is a luxury. I do math. I consider contingencies. I inventory tools. Military training never leaves you. You fold pain into checklists. You break panic into protocols. The body remembers how to brace. The mind remembers how to wait. So I waited. He called, days later, with sunlight in his voice, because men who plan in the dark always borrow light when they want your trust. Dad, he said, let's go to Alaska, like when I was a kid. Denali, just us. No noise, no city. Remember? Remember. As if memory were a lake you skip stones across, and not the glacier it really is old. Heavy, treacherous dot. I could tell you I refused, but I didn't refuse. A father's hope is a stubborn animal. It hibernates between the ribs. It wakes up hungry for miracles and will eat your spine if you let it. Also, there were the papers, the kind you draft with a pen you only use when the house is quiet enough to hear the ink thinking. They weighed more than paper should. They weighed possibilities. Parental love becomes estate planning when you stop believing in tomorrow. When a son says after you die, the calendar grows teeth. I slid the papers into my bag like a weather forecast you hope you won't need. I know what you're asking. No, not out loud, but I know. Why go then? Why step into the forest he set on fire? Because sometimes survival isn't refusing the trap. It's learning the trap's architecture so well that it has more exits than the hunter imagined. Because sometimes you need to see how far the rod has climbed before you find the beam that still holds. But let's not jump ahead. This is act. The crack is just a crack hairline. Elegant, deniable. You can pretend the vase still holds water if you set it at the right angle. And don't invite guests who stare. People assume betrayal is dramatic. It isn't. Betrayal is administrative. It files itself under familiar and asks for your signature. You'll sign your name practiced, your hand steady, because nothing in the posture of the moment tells you that you're writing the preface to your own autopsy. Maybe you're exaggerating. You'll tell me. Maybe he was just angry. Maybe. Anger says awful things, but anger doesn't calculate interest. Greed does. Greed is patient and polite until it doesn't have to be. And the way he said it, after you die, had no heat. Only schedule. Listen, warmth can be faked. Cold can't. Cold is absence. And absence is the only honesty some people manage when they've used up the rest. I went to the garage and checked the camping gear I hadn't touched in years. Old canvas smells like a previous version of yourself. Knives remember hands. Rope remembers knots. The compass sat where I'd left it, arrogant with certainty. North is north, it said with its little red tongue. I almost laughed. North is north until your map lies. Then north is simply a habit. I packed slowly. The way you pack for a war you can't admit is a war. Socks, layered. Fire starters, doubled. First aid, complete. And because I'm a man who doesn't bet unless he's the house, I packed something else too. The kind of clarity that only arrives when a person you love declares themselves your heir in the same breath they wish you gone. Clarity, if you're curious, weighs nothing. It changes everything. Before bed, I stood in front of Sarah's photo. The glass had a new hairline scratch from the day the door slammed. She looked undamaged. That's the thing about the dead. They have better posture than guilt. They look like forgiveness even when they're really witnesses. Would you have seen it earlier? I asked her face. Would you have cut him loose sooner, harder, cleaner? Of course she didn't answer. The dead are kind to kind sometimes. They let you stage both sides of the conversation and still lose. I slept in the way a soldier sleeps at attention, horizontal. Morning arrived with its wet applause on the windows. I made coffee strong enough to file metal and drank it like an oath. If you're listening, really listening, you can feel the hinge of a day. It's the moment where your breath switches hands. I felt it when I zipped the bag, when I turned the key, when I pulled the door behind me and didn't look back, because looking back is a ritual for people who expect to return the same. But again, not yet. You want the Alaska of it, the claw and the cold. You'll have it. Right now, you need the arithmetic that got us there. You need the math of a father who mistook generosity for strategy, who thought he could outspend grief and outbribe fate. You need to understand that love without law breeds only appetite. And appetite, when fed without labor, becomes a god that devours its priest. I'm not asking for your pity. Pity is a weak currency, and I've traded in too much of that already. I'm asking for your attention, not because my story is rare, but because it isn't. Maybe you know a mason. Maybe you raised one. Maybe you are one. Maybe you built a life of invoices and engines and believed reliability would save you from the quiet sabotage of your own softness. Maybe you hear a voice in your house that says, after you die, with an accent you taught it. If you do, this is the part where you stop pretending the crack is cosmetic. This is the part where the camera holds on the glass until the spiderweb blooms and you understand the fracture isn't coming. It's already here, flowering under your fingerprints. I collected the papers from my desk, the legal ones, the ones that pretend to be about assets, but are really about absolution. I slid them into the inner pocket of the bag, the way a man might tuck a confession into his boot and walk into court. Outside, the rain rehearsed its old symphony on my hood. The world smelled like metal and rain and the idea of forgiveness. When people tell stories like this, they swing for the tragic fences. They use words like monster and victim because it makes the accounting simpler. But I don't need simple, I need true. Mason isn't a monster. He's a mirror in a hoodie. He reflects every bad bargain I made with myself and stamped love on the receipt. He reflects every time I chose ease over effort, mercy over meaning, payment over presence. He's the arithmetic of my avoidance, all grown up and asking for 5,000 now. Let's not romanticize this. I'm not a saint burning for his salvation. I'm a man with a history of tidy cowardice. I hid behind generosity the way a child hides behind a curtain with his feet showing. So if this is a revenge monologue, it's not about revenge on him. It's revenge on the part of me that mistook softness for salvation. It's the quiet surgical correction of a faulty equation. Love minus boundaries equals loss with interest. Now. Breathe. Do you feel it? The space narrowing, the cooling of the room, the sense that something you've been postponing has finally put on a coat and come to your door. This is the threshold. On the other side is wilderness, the literal one with trees like cathedrals and claws like arguments, and the figurative one where a father learns whether he can still engineer a life with his hands when his heart has stripped its threads. I could end here with a sermon, but sermons are for Sundays, and I've already buried enough of those. Instead, I'll leave you with a map. Not a compass, those lie nicely. A map made of questions that don't care how you answer. When did you decide protection meant payment? When did you forget that dignity is earned in small, stubborn increments? When did you last say no like a gift and not a punishment? When, exactly, did the person you love begin speaking of your death as logistics? Consider carefully. There's a train in the distance of this story. You can hear it now, the iron syllables, the steel rhyme. It's coming whether we want it or not. Men like me don't outrun trains. We learn the timetable and step aside at the precise second the wind changes. I'm telling you this because there's still time to step aside. There's still time to look at the crack and call it by its name. I zipped the bag. I locked the door. The house exhaled. You ever notice how a house knows when you've told it the truth? The floorboards stop complaining. The air stops bargaining. Even the fridge, the tireless priest of domestic ritual, takes a vow of silence for half a breath. I stood on the porch while the rain rehearsed being inevitable. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at an enemy only he could see. I envied him. I could see mine just fine. What comes next is snow and tooth and distance. It's a son with a plan and a father with a pencil. It's a wilderness that draws straight lines with cold fingers. But before we leave, understand this. The crack wasn't him walking in and asking for money. The crack wasn't even after you die. The crack was older. It was the day I chose to pad his world so thickly he could fall asleep on responsibility and never wake. The day I traded the difficult dignity of teaching for the soothing silence of transfer confirmations. The day I swore to Sarah I would give him everything and forgot that everything worth keeping costs effort, not allowance. I won't apologize for the metaphors. Engines are metaphors. Money is a metaphor. Even Alaska is a metaphor. A rough draft of judgment, a courtroom with mountains. But at the end of a day, a man has to turn the key and decide which parts still belong in the machine. I turned the key. The truck agreed. We left the neighborhood like sentence and verdict, leaving the same mouth. That's where Act I ends, if you need curtains. Not because the show is over, but because the audience needs a breath. A breath to ask themselves whether they've called generosity what it was not. Whether they've raised palaces where barns would have done. Whether they've taught someone to love them by ledger dot. Hold that breath. Don't waste it on pity or panic. Save it. You'll need it where we're going. The wild forgives nothing. Not even good intentions, especially not those. And I have a son who wants a kingdom and a father who finally understands what the crown is made of. There's a moment when a house stops being shelter and starts being courtroom. Mine did it on a Thursday, not with gavels, not with juries. With a single knock that wasn't a knock at all, it was a rhythm of demand disguised as familiarity. Mason again, hoodie again, damp again. The city drips on him the way contempt drips on marble. Slow, steady, unremarkable, until you notice the crack. I opened the door, and for a split second, I let myself hope. That's the weakness of father's hope, is our addiction. He smiled the kind of smile that carries receipts. Dad, he said, I was thinking maybe I was too harsh last week. Apology? No, don't be fooled. His voice had the cadence of rehearsal, not remorse. Words spoken to mirrors before they were spoken to me. Too harsh, I repeated, like it was foreign currency. He nodded, eyes flickering to the mantel, to Sarah's photograph, to the life that still haunted our walls. I want to make it right. I've got a plan. Plans. The word should come with hazard labels. When Mason says it, it means I've already been factored into the equation as collateral, he sat, uninvited, in Sarah's chair, the one I'd never moved because some ghosts prefer thrones. His weight bent the cushion, and something inside me bent with it. We should go away together, he said. Reconnect. Just us. Alaska. Remember when you taught me to light fires in the rain? I remembered. I remembered his hand shaking, my patience holding. I remembered the pride that bloomed in him and in me when the spark caught. And I remembered how pride, once outsourced, becomes dependency with a better haircut. Alaska, wilderness, isolation. If betrayal wears camouflage, it looks like reconciliation. He sold it with urgency. Tickets expiring, friends canceling, opportunity wasting. Manufactured scarcity, the oldest trick in commerce, now applied to fatherhood. You don't even like camping, I said. Because I didn't have you with me, he countered and smiled. Smiles are knives when you know where to look. I could have refused, should have. But hesitation is a drug. It numbs with possibility. What if he's sincere? What if this is the cracked ceiling, not widening? That's how weakness speaks, with ifs instead of facts. So I told him yes. I told him yes because the human heart is an organ of stupidity. It keeps beating even when you'd rather it shut down for repairs. But before Alaska, before snow and claws and silence, there was the night he returned for the second act of his little performance. He stormed in again. No preamble. Damn sneakers squeaking like accusations. My desk was my fortress pens, invoices, ledgers. But a fortress is nothing when the invader already has the keys. Dad, I need 5,000 tonight. The phrasing was surgical. Not, could you, not would you. Need, tonight. Emergency framed as entitlement. I leaned back, the flannel shirt suddenly stiff around my shoulders. I already gave you 3. Ren ate it. His fist tightened, his face flushed. You think that's enough? You think $3,000 means anything anymore? I thought about Sarah's medical bills, how I had to choose between treatments and tuition. I thought about sleeping in the shop, the concrete floor colder than grief, because I couldn't afford to heat the apartment that month. And here he was, telling me 3,000 was an insult. Work, I said simply. Work? He laughed sharp, bitter. Why should I work when you sit on all that money? When you play dictator of the family fortune, dictator again. That word found me twice. A coincidence is an accident. Twice is strategy. He wanted me cornered by language. And language, when wielded by your own child, cuts deeper than steel. I'm trying to teach you responsibility, I said, shoulders straightening like an old drill sergeant's reflex. Responsibility? He spat the word. After you die, I'll run the shops better than you ever did. And there it was again. Death as currency. Inheritance as ambition. My absence as his business plan. I stared at him, words drained, as silence swelled like a bruise between us. He read the shock in my face, realized he'd gone too far, and left. The slam of the door was punctuation. Sarah's photo rattled again. Her smile kept mocking me from behind the glass. Radiant, young, forever turned toward a boy who now calculated my death like a stock option. That night, I pulled out photo albums, self-inflicted wounds in glossy paper. Each page a reminder of how I fed him sugar when he needed salt. Tuition checks, birthday cards, vacations he never earned. Every gift was a bribe against the silence. Every bribe was a brick in the wall. And when I finished flipping, the arithmetic was clear. I had built not a son, but a creditor dot. Do you understand? This is where empathy and horror kiss. Because Mason wasn't a villain in a cape. He was my mirror. He was the reflection of every cowardice disguised as kindness. I wasn't his savior. I was his accomplice. That realization is colder than any Alaskan night. Days later, he called again. Voice too bright, too eager, like a salesman with quotas. Dad, let's go camping. Denali. Just us. The silence in my office weighed 100 pounds. My pen hovered over legal documents, wills, transfers, protections. Paper shields against blood betrayals. Why now? I asked. Because it might be our last chance to fix this. Last chance. He sold the trip like a clearance sale. Everything must go, including me. I closed my eyes. Hope and instinct wrestled. Instinct said no. Hope whispered maybe. Hope always whispers. Instinct roars. But roars are easier to ignore. They scare us because they're right. All right, I said finally. My voice betrayed me. Let's do it. Fantastic, he answered. Too fast, too polished. You see, Dad, this is going to be amazing. The line went dead. My hand trembled on the phone. The drizzle outside painted streaks on the window, patterns of inevitability. On my desk, the legal papers stare back, heavier than steel dot. So here I am, telling you this not because I want sympathy, but because I want witnesses. Witnesses to the fact that betrayal doesn't arrive like thunder, it arrives like drizzle, persistent, unnoticed, until you realize you're soaked through. And Alaska? Alaska was the storm waiting to swallow drizzle whole. Airports are temples of false beginnings. Everyone smiles too wide, pretends departure is adventure and not escape. SeaTac smelled of disinfectant and desperation, and Mason bounced on his heels like a teenager rehearsing enthusiasm. His backpack was new, tags still dangling like lies not even cut off. He waved when he saw me, too eager, too rehearsed. "Perfect timing, Dad," he said. "They just called boarding." His grin stretched too far, as if joy were elastic and he was daring it to snap. I studied him the way soldiers study terrain, angles, exits, shadows. His left eye twitched when he smiled, a nervous tic he hadn't had as a boy. When you love someone too long, you learn their tells. You also learn when the performance has replaced the person. The tickets were one way, though he never mentioned it. I noticed when he slid the boarding pass across the counter. Anchorage. It read, clean font, no return. A small omission, but omissions are confessions if you know how to listen. The plane lifted, engines growling like chained dogs. Seattle shrank, drizzle becoming abstract art on the window. Mason spoke the entire climb stories of buddies who canceled, promises of father-son bonding. He laughed at his own jokes, too loud, filling silences before they exposed him. I didn't answer much. Military training taught me silence is a weapon. You wait long enough, people fill it with their truths. His truths leaked out between chuckles. "Everything's paid for, Dad, all set up. 5 days, just us, no distractions. You'll see, it'll fix everything." Fix. The word stuck. Fixes are for engines. People don't get fixed. They either break differently or they pretend better. Anchorage greeted us with a wind sharp enough to shave skin. The rental car smelled of plastic and paranoia. Mason drove, his grip too tight on the wheel, his excitement pitched just above natural. The highway unspooled north, mountains rising like witnesses. "Remember when you taught me to read tracks?" he said. "I remember," I answered. My voice was flat steel. He wanted nostalgia, a soft place to land. I gave him nothing. He glanced at me, forced to chuckle. "This will be like that. Back to basics. Survival. Just us. Back to basics." Interesting phrase, coming from someone who never learned them. Denali National Park is not a place. It's a verdict. The trees are older than your regrets. The silence is thicker than your excuses. Snow doesn't fall there, it judges. Each flake a jury. Each gust a sentence. We set camp near dusk. The tent was new, gear brand new, untouched. He hadn't packed it himself. Someone else had arranged it. Mason fumbled with poles, cursed at zippers. His hands shook in the cold, but also in the fear of being exposed. I watched, silent, patient. "Little rusty," he muttered, laughing thinly. "You've never done this," I said. Not a question. He froze, then forced another smile. "That's why I have you." Yes, that's why he had me. Until he didn't. That night, the fire crackled, a fragile sound in an ocean of quiet. I sat across from him, shadows painting his face into something half child, half stranger. He poked the flames like they were buttons on a console. "Dad," he said suddenly, "I know things got bad, but this trip, it's our reset." "Reset," I repeated. The word tasted like cheap whiskey. "Is that what you call it?" "What would you call it?" he asked, leaning in. "A trap." But I didn't say it. I let silence answer. Silence is crueler than accusation. In the distance. A wolf howled long, low, deliberate. Mason flinched. I didn't. The wilderness doesn't scare men who've already lived through funerals. It scares boys who still think consequences are negotiable. He looked at me, eyes reflecting firelight, and for half a breath, I saw the boy he'd been, the boy clutching my hand at Sarah's funeral. Suit too big, eyes too wide. Then the moment vanished, replaced by calculation. "After this," he said softly, "things will be different." I almost laughed. Different was his euphemism for gone. Different meant me. Removed. Do you know what suspicion feels like in the body? It's not fear, it's weight, a heaviness behind the ribs, a tightening of breath not from panic, but from clarity. By the second night, clarity had unpacked its bags. I found the clue in his backpack, maps folded wrong, circled areas too far from the main trail, notes scrawled in handwriting too careful, rations, 2 days, Dad, distract. Words that weren't camping plans. They were contingencies. My contingencies. I placed the map back exactly where I found it. A soldier doesn't tip his hand until the battlefield is ready. On the third morning, Mason suggested a hike deeper in. No tourists, no rangers, just wilderness. His tone was bright, but the brightness cracked at the edges. His eyes betrayed calculation measured, cautious, waiting for me to agree. And I did. Of course I did. Not because I trusted him, but because trust wasn't the game anymore. The game was patience. He thought he was leading me into the wild. He didn't realize the wild was already inside me, waiting. This was the bait. Alaska as reconciliation, nature as theater, isolation as opportunity. He thought the wilderness would do the work for him. Cold, hunger, accident. He underestimated 2 things. The discipline of a man who's buried a wife, and the endurance of a father who's already mourned a living son. When he smiled that night by the fire, I smiled back. He thought it was surrender. He didn't know his calculation got the wilderness test character. He'd said that once, years ago, repeating my own lesson back to me. He was right. But character isn't tested by snow or wolves. It's tested by how long you can sit across from someone plotting your death and still roast their marshmallow until it's golden. That's the bait. That's the hook he thought I swallowed. But the truth, I was already sharpening my knife. Not for him, for the man I used to be. The man who mistook generosity for love. The man who surrendered his son to indulgence. The man who thought, after you die, was just a phrase and not a prophecy. The wilderness wasn't going to kill me. I'd been dying for years already. The wilderness was going to resurrect me. That morning broke with a blade's bright edge. Cold sharpened the air to something you could slice bread with. We took the narrow trail east of the ridge, where the spruce stand like jurors and the snowpack speaks only in verdicts. Mason set a pace that wasn't a pace, too fast for sightseeing, too slow for distance. He kept glancing over his shoulder, checking not whether I followed, but whether I noticed. I noticed. Past the cut bank, he said, pointing where the river curled like a question. Shorter this way. Shorter is salesman speak for riskier. The river threw up mist like a body trying to remember how to breathe. He forgot to clip the map back to my pack. It slid to the ground and lay there like a dropped alibi. I picked it up without comment. He misplaced the water filter by setting it 2 feet from the edge of the bank, where a thoughtless boot might knock it in. It didn't fall. I'm not a thoughtless boot. The sky wore a pewter glare. Somewhere far off, a rookery of ravens argued over protocol. We moved through a corridor of trees that held their breath the way people do before bad news. The ground tilted. The wind shifted. He looked at me with a brightness that had nothing to do with light. Trail splits ahead, he said. Left goes higher. Right follows the river. No tourists that way. No rangers either, I answered. Dottie smiled. Just us. Just us. I've learned to translate my son. Just us meant just me eventually, alone with the kind of quiet that ends a story. We reached the split. He gestured right and walked like a man with a destination only he could see. The river hissed under a skin of black ice, yard-wide leads flashing teeth. We hopped stones that weren't stones at all. Rounded sermons about balance and consequence. Mason stumbled, recovered, laughed too loud. The laugh echoed wrong, a ribbon tearing. Careful, I said, not because he deserved it, but because I do. We stopped at a clearing where the spruce gave way to white space, and the wind could build a sentence without interruption. He set his pack down, unzipped it, rummaged, frowned. He rummaged more, frowned harder. He glanced at my pack. He'd expected me to be hungrier for his instructions than for oxygen. Problem? I asked. Thought I packed more. His voice tried casual and failed the audition. I watched him produce 2 protein bars with theatrical relief. Then, accidentally, toss one into the snow where it sank into slush by the river's edge. He lunged, missed, and the current took it A neat little miracle of inevitability. Clumsy, he said. Yes, I said. He stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and then the performance dropped its mask. The face underneath was not new. It was simply honest, calm, cold, administrative. He slung his pack, stepped back, measured the distance between us like a surveyor drawing lines through a future. Dad, he said, and the word was airless. Bye. Go meet the grizzly. He said it like he was confirming an appointment on my calendar. Then he turned. No flourish, no sprint, just deliberate steps downriver, away from the designated trail, away from common sense, away from me, a boy who had always counted on others to close his open loops. I didn't call after him. Panic is a flare gun. It tells everything with teeth where you are. I watched until the trees made him theoretical. Then I breathed, not the frantic kind, the counted kind. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. A soldier's square. A mechanic's mantra. Breathe or break. Inventory time. He thought he understood my redundancies. He'd seen the stove, the filter, the obvious lighter in the lid pocket. He'd seen me forget to stow the ferro rod on the outside loop and had smiled, generous with his secret. He hadn't seen the other lighter taped inside my belt sheath or the matchbook laminated in wax and tucked behind the insole of my left boot. He didn't know the hem of my jacket held 10 feet of paracord stitched into it, or that my old watch hid 3 iodine tablets in the cap. He didn't know that a man who built a life, then rebuilt it after death, doesn't walk into wilderness with single points of failure. I ate half the bar. I pocketed the rest. I moved uphill, not down, because cold flows like water and only fools sleep where cold chooses to collect. I found a stand of stunted black spruce and built a windbreak with my back to the trunk's dark spine. Birch bark tears like paper and burns like confession. I peeled just enough from a deadfall, nested it with shaved curls of kindling, and gave the nest my flame. Fire answered like a loyal dog. Heat is honesty. It tells you exactly how much you have and exactly how fast it will leave. Afternoon folded itself smaller. The sky bruised into early evening. Tracks stitched the snow on the far edge of the clearing. A broad, deliberate pad with the faintest of claw arcs. Brown bear, not fresh. I gave the print the same respect I gave a grief I think I've outlived. I didn't step in it. I didn't ignore it. I noted, adjusted, moved. Night dropped like a verdict. Stars arrived pin-sharp, unblinking. The cold did what cold does, negotiated directly with blood. I turned my canteen belly up, tucked it against my core under the parka, and slept the way a man on trial sleeps. One ear open, one eye closed, one hand on the handle that remembers other winters. Dreams tried for me. Sarah at the Little League field. Mason at 8, eyes hungry for praise that cost nothing. My hand on his shoulder, my mouth full of promises I had no right to make. The fire popped, a cinder flew. I woke to the scent of singed wool and the clean metallic certainty that tomorrow would expect an account. Dawn is not gentle up here. It rips the dark away and leaves the bones of the day exposed. I ate the other half of the bar. Melted snow in a tin cup, dimpled with old dents. Doused the coals. Scuffed the ash. A man leaves a sight the way he leaves a lie, erased where possible, instructive where not. Plan, gain elevation. Sightline the ridge. Avoid river ice. Cold water is a contract you don't want to sign. Angle west to intersect the service road. I memorized from a map he hadn't bothered to misfold. Live. The slope-tested lungs he didn't earn, but I did. I counted steps, not to reach a number, but to keep the fear from inventing one. The snow shifted from powder to crust to treacherous sugar. I listened to it talk under my boots, a slow Morse code of risk. A ptarmigan exploded from a drift like a timed heart attack. I didn't flinch hard enough to waste heat. Ravens shadowed me in ragged verses. Law clerks taking notes. Halfway up, I found a glove. Not mine. Not recent. Leather stiff, fingers frozen into a gesture halfway between warning and wave. I tucked it under a rock. Not superstitious, just unwilling to leave a story face up in the snow. By noon, the wind decided it wanted my face. It filed me down. I tilted my hood and let discipline do the ancient arithmetic. 1 foot, then the other. A small, stunned sun broke the cloud's crust for a minute and offered me a compass reading without needles. South was brighter. North was honest. I chose honest. On the lee side of a rock spur, I found what I didn't know I was praying for, a track of old snowshoe prints softened by last week's flurry and stiffened by cold. Human? Ranger? Hunter? It didn't matter. People mean path, and path means probability. I angled into it, let my stride set to its ghost cadence, and followed until the prints resolved into a line too straight to be animal habit and too purposeful to be accident. The right kind of human had been this way, and recently enough that my ribs loosened a notch. Late light. A box of a cabin squared itself against the trees, dark as a closed mouth. Government brown, roofline low, chimney stub like a punctuation mark. I knocked, no answer. I tried the latch. Unlocked. Rangers trust the math of decency out here. If you make it to a door like this, you deserve the stove dot inside. The air held the smell of old wood smoke and wet wool, the religion of survival. A paper logbook sat on a little table, penciled names climbing the margins. I wrote nothing. Writing is a form of presence, and I preferred absence. I fed the stove 2 splits. They caught, murmured, performed the priestly work of pulling the cold out of the room. On the shelf, a coil of wire, a small tin of tea, a can of beans dented into humility. I took the tea, left the beans, and added to the woodpile outside payment in kind. My body thawed in layers, not all of them physical. When heat reaches your bones, it knocks on a door inside your head and asks if you'd like to stop being clever and start being simple. I said yes. I slept 2 hours, boots on, pack his pillow, knife under the jack in him like a quiet friend. When I woke, the light had the color of nickel. Time to move. The road would be within a mile if my map was less a picture and more a promise. It was. The plowed cut through the snow line looked like a scar on a pale face. I stood in the middle of it, a solitary exclamation mark in a long sentence. A truck arrived the way luck does. Late, loud, unembarrassed. White Ford, utility rack, 2 men in hats that had known other heads. They slowed, window down, faces open. You okay? The driver asked. Better 5 minutes ago, I said. The sarcasm warmed me more than the stove had. They laughed, because men laugh when they recognize their own outline. Where are you headed? Anchorage, I answered. Then added, soon. Hop in? I did. The cab smelled like coffee and chain oil. The radio murmured about weather like it was a rival. We didn't talk much. Good men know silence is a blanket you don't steal in winter dot at a junction. They let me out, the driver tapping 2 fingers to his brim in a farewell both casual and kind. A diner squatted by the road, neon insisting on its own name. Inside, the waitress poured body temperature mercy into a chipped mug and called me hun like a benediction. In the far booth, a bulletin board hosted flyers for things that still believed in next week. I made calls. Not to Mason. Not to anyone who would tell him the narrative had slipped a leash. I called a bush pilot. I didn't know I knew until I said the airport code out loud. Cash does what apology can't. He flew me to Anchorage in an aircraft that rattled like a truth too long delayed. From there, a commercial flight back to Seattle. One way coming, one way going. Even trades, the universe's favorite joke. On the flight, I reviewed the papers in my lab, the way a surgeon reviews the map of someone else's blood. Not emotional, exact, the trust instruments. The emergency transfer to the manager, whose loyalty I had tested quietly across 10 winters. The clause that altered my son's monthly allowance into a conditional stipend tethered to hours logged and responsibilities met. The letter to Mason not cruel, not kind, not negotiable. I landed in drizzle so familiar I could have identified it by brand. The city received me with its usual gray shrug. I drove home through streets that had watched us become the family we advertised and the family we were. The house unlocked itself like it had missed me. Houses lie, but they lie to make you braver. I changed the locks anyway, in the garage. My tools greeted me with their faithful faces. Wrench, mallet, vise, the clean language of work. I tuned the silence until it hummed. I made coffee that could cauterize. I set the papers on the kitchen table where food used to go. I opened Sarah's drawer, the little one that held string, tape, a pair of scissors that had cut homework and hopes, and took out the family pen. She'd liked it because it drew clean lines. I have always trusted clean lines. I sighed. Not revenge. Revision. A revised map that matched the terrain. No more stipends bought with apologies. No more allowances disguised as atonement. No more mortgage payments on the palace of a boy's unearned certainty. The shops would outlive me. They would not outlive the habit of being ransomed. When the courier came for the envelope, he wore rain on his shoulders like epaulets. He didn't know he was carrying the end of a religion. He asked for a signature. I gave him one. He left. The house closed its mouth on the kind of quiet that doesn't bite. Night came early because guilt sets the clocks and grief resets them. I sat in Sarah's chair at last. My weight of confession it had waited years to hear. The room held still, the way rooms do when they realize the people inside have finally run out of pretending. If this were a different story, I'd sharpen a knife, load a gun, set a trap that bleeds. But this is not that story. This is a story about law, the small hard kind that lives between no and enough. It's a story about a man who climbed out of the snow with a new religion. Boundaries as warmth, work as language, love as a verb with prerequisites. Outside, a car sighed past, tires whispering over wet asphalt. Somewhere down the block, a porch light blinked twice and decided against a third. I poured a second cup, then didn't drink it. I placed Sarah's photograph on the table, not as talisman, not as jury, but as co-worker. We were going to finish this shift together. He'd come back soon. He'd open the door with a key that no longer believed in him. He'd call my name like he always had, like a receipt he intended to cash. I would answer with weather, not storm, season. The surprise was ready, simple as winter, a home that no longer negotiated, a father who no longer bartered, a future that refused to be paid for in advance. I wasn't waiting to kill a plan. I was waiting to bury a habit. Across the room, the heater clicked on, a small steel heart remembering its job. I listened to it thrum through the vents, a low mechanical lullaby. The house, the city, the night, they all breathed in time. The lock turned, a pause, a second attempt, confusion, the sound of someone meeting a new version of a very old door. "Dad?" he called, voice tipping toward playful. "Hey, funny thing with the lock." I stood, not quickly, not slowly, like a tide that knows exactly what shore to claim. He would step in, dripping drizzle, smiling that elastic smile, reaching for the old script where I offer warmth and he offers hunger. He would look for the map he wrote and find a different country. He would search for the boy I used to fund and find a man he didn't recognize. I set the pen down. The wilderness was behind me. The wilderness was in front of me. The difference now was simple and absolute. I knew which way was north, and I did not need a compass for it. I crossed the room and opened the door. There's a sound the world makes when the script ends. It isn't applause. It isn't silence. It's the click of a lock refusing to remember you. Mason stood there, drizzle dripping from his hoodie, grin spread too wide, as if he could charm the hinges into forgiveness. "Lad," he said, lifting the useless key like a magician with a broken trick. "Locks got changed, huh? Funny, not funny, precise." He stepped inside anyway, the way entitled men step into rooms that have stopped inviting them. He scanned the kitchen, the table, the envelope already gone, the pen drying. His eyes narrowed not suspicion, but recognition. He knew. Not everything. Enough. "Where's the paperwork?" he asked, voice too steady. "Where's the will?" There it was. No preamble, no apology, no disguise. Straight to inheritance. Straight to numbers. Not even pretending anymore. "In transit," I said. "To who?" "Not you." The smile faltered. Elastic, stretched too often, finally snapping. His fists balled. His breath quickened. I'd seen that posture before in alleys, in barracks, in men who mistook desperation for strength. "You can't do that," he said. I already did. His laugh came broken, half rattle, half threat. "You think this fixes anything? You think rewriting paper changes what I deserve?" "Deserve," I repeated. Words taste different when you strip them of pretense. You don't get to use that word. You inherit only what you build, and you've built nothing but appetite. He slammed his palm on the table, the sound sharp, desperate. "I gave up everything for you." I tilted my head, a gesture Sarah used when someone confused confession with excuse. No, I said softly. I gave up everything for you. And you mistook it for permission. For a heartbeat, he looked 10 years old again, eyes wet, lip trembling, mask slipping. Then the hardness returned, brittle but loud. I'll fight it. I'll take you to court. You'll what? My voice cut, calm, surgical. Sue me for not dying on schedule? The words landed. They hung in the air, bitter and metallic. He flinched not physically, but spiritually. A man confronted not with violence, but with truth. And truth is the only weapon that doesn't miss. He paced, sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. He looked at Sarah's photo. He looked at me. He looked at himself, reflected faintly in the glass. That's when I saw it, the realization. Not guilt, not sorrow. Realization that every dollar he thought he owned was already gone, evaporated into the ink of a signature he couldn't erase. Why? He whispered. Because love isn't payment, I answered. And I won't fund your hunger anymore. His breath hitched. He wanted to shout, but shouting costs energy. And men like him conserve when they see the ledger turning red. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words. Just absence. Finally, he grabbed his pack, still too new, still smelling of store tags, and turned toward the door. No slam this time. No echo. Just retreat. The house exhaled when he left. Even the floorboards seemed relieved. I sat back in Sarah's chair. The photograph caught the light, her smile steady, untouchable. For years, I'd read it as accusation. Now it looked like agreement. The revelation didn't come with lightning. It came with the radiator's hum and the taste of cooling coffee. Simple, undramatic, unavoidable. I had spent 2 decades mistaking generosity for parenting, mistaking silence for peace, mistaking survival for love. And in doing so, I had raised a son who believed the only way to honor me was to profit from my absence. But here was the revelation. The wilderness hadn't been Alaska. The wilderness had been this house, these walls, these habits. Alaska was just a mirror. The real frontier was admitting that my weakness wasn't grief. It was cowardice. And cowardice, once named, loses jurisdiction. I looked out the window. Seattle's drizzle painted streaks on the glass, the same as always. But it looked different now, less like erosion, more like cleansing. Outside, cars whispered past, lives unfolding, unbroken by inheritance or ledger. The insight was sharp, final, liberating. The true betrayal hadn't been my son plotting my death. The true betrayal had been me, plotting my own life away, one compromise, one check, one silence at a time. Not anymore. So here's the click, the climax, the revelation. The transformation never happens outside, not in snowfields, not in courtrooms, not in campsites abandoned by greedy sons. It happens when you decide quietly, firmly, that you will no longer fund your own destruction. That's the point of no return. The door is closed. The locks are changed. The map is rewritten. Mason wanted a kingdom. I wanted a son. Neither of us will get what we wanted. But I finally have what I needed. Freedom. And freedom, unlike inheritance, can't be stolen. Thank you for staying with me and listening this far. Your attention is a gift. Did these minutes mean something to you? Then please, follow the channel. Every click from you is a push that helps me keep bringing stories that truly stay with us.